Hello guys and welcome to a new Spring Boot Security episode. Today we are going to glue all the things together and we are going to configure Spring Security to work with JWT. More specifically, we are going to integrate the JWT authorization and authentication filtering in the Spring Security pipeline. And if everything goes okay, then we also do a quick demo and we'll talk about the flow of client applications that are using endpoints that are secured with JWT. Okay, so before we get started, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to this channel and stay tuned for more courses that will sharpen your programming skills. Also, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button. We'll go to the Spring Security configuration and we'll try to configure it so that we use the new JWT filters that we've just created. So right now our application permits everybody to basically log in, okay, and we want to configure this and enable JWT authentication and authorization. We'll leave the authentication provider, which is the database provider, intact. The password encoder is intact, so we're just dealing with the HTTP authentication pipeline. Okay, so there are a couple of things that we can do while working with JWT. For example, we can eliminate some of the features that are not needed when using this kind of token-based authentication. For example, cross-site request forgery is not needed here. Cross-site request forgery is pretty useful when we are dealing with form-based authentication, but for token-based authentication, we do not need this feature, and we can make our application lighter by removing some of these heavy things that are enabled by default. Also, we do not need a session, okay, because in form-based authentication the session is important because it keeps that cookie for a number of minutes, and thus we can access our application without being asked to authenticate each and every time. But with token-based authentication, once we grab a token, we send that token over and over again with each new request until it expires, and we don't keep anything in the session. We just resend that token until it expires. So for the session credential policy, we can use the stateless session creation policy. So we will not have a sticky session. Okay, so now that we have this, we can go ahead and authorize our request. Okay, so just to comment something here, so remove cross-site request forgery and state in session because in JWT we do not need them. Okay, and before we authorize our request, we can actually add our filters. So the first filter that we want to add in this pipeline is the JWT authentication filter. So we're going to create a new instance of the JWT authentication filter, and we're going to pass in the authentication manager. Then we'll add in the JWT authorization filter that we created, and we'll pass in authentication manager, and also we need to pass in the user repository if we have it, and I think we should have it here somewhere. Okay, if we don't have the user repository, then of course we can implement it here, user repository. Okay, we're going to add this in the constructor. Okay, and now we can basically inject it here, user repository. And also we have, so the authorization filter has 3 arguments. We also need authentication manager, and there was something else that we needed, and we are missing basically the authentication entry point, and we're going to inject it here as well. So it's basic authentication entry point, and we are going to add this in the constructor as well. Okay, and now we can pass this in here as well, this authentication entry point. Okay, now the order in which we add these filters really matters, because we first need the authentication filter and then the authorization filter. Okay, so don't add them any other way around. Cool. So we have our filters. Let's just add a comment here. Add JWT filters. Auth. Second one, authorization. Authentication. Okay. And now we can actually start and authorize the request. So right now we allow every request, but we have to modify this, of course. So for example, we are going to do some ant matchers here to filter requests. So for example, when we want to log in, we need to allow everybody the access to perform requests against the login endpoint, because in the login endpoint we are going to pass in username and password, and these are going to be fed up to the JWT authentication filter. So the login endpoint should be restricted. Okay, then let's secure our REST controller. Okay, so for example, the API public management reports should only be available to managers. API public management reports, or actually API public management everything. We need a role in here, so role, I think it's role manager. I don't think it's management. And we'll duplicate this line and we'll say admin, because I think we have, yes, admin. It should only be available to the user who has the administrator role, administrator. Okay, so and of course test is also free. So right now we have a valid JWT authentication. I just want to check out that I didn't misspell the roles. Okay, so role admin, role manager, and here I have role manager and role admin. Okay, so role admin. Cool. So right now we removed some features that are not needed in the context of JWT authentication. We added the filters that we created in a very specific order, and then we are configuring access rules. Okay, and this is how you configure Spring Security to work with token-based authentication. Now, if everything is okay, we should fire up our application and we should see it working. Now, the perils of live codings are that sometimes you might make a mistake and you realize it when you actually demo the app. But if that's the case, we'll fix it and we'll get to the bottom of it. Okay, so we are very, very close now to finishing the JWT part. Let's just see if our application is actually working. Okay, I tried to fire up the application, and the first error that I got is this one. So we cannot inject the authentication entry point. Okay, which makes sense because we are not having we don't have multiple security realms in here, so we don't actually need this authentication entry point. So I'm going to delete it. Okay, again, these are the perils of live coding. Sometimes you need to fix things on the fly. Okay, and I'm going to use another constructor for this JWT authorization filter, because I really don't need this authentication entry point. Okay, so I'm going to override this. I'm going to use this constructor that has just two parameters, and I'm just going to pass in the authentication manager and the user repository. Okay, so no need for authentication entry point. I'm going to delete it from here, and now I'm going to try and start the application again and see if that fixes the issue. So in theory, everything should boot right now. Okay, but apparently not. So roles should not start with role. Okay, so when we configured the Spring Security here, We don't need to specify role manager and role admin. We just need admin and manager, and Spring will do the rest for us. Okay, let's try it again. The good thing about this is that, you know, if you fix enough errors, if you have to deal with them, at least, you know, you'll have pretty fast answers. Cool. So now the application has started on port 8443. Okay, so let's try and test if everything works according to plan. So I'm going to go to the JWT authentication filter because this is the first one, and I'm going to put some breakpoints in here because I want to see that authentication is performed correctly. Okay, so I'm going to open Postman, you know, and I'm going to send a request to dash login. Okay, so remember, we also added this in the comments here. We need to post this request to dash login because it's a convention used in Spring Security. Okay, and you know, in the body of this request, so this is a post request, and in the body we are sending a little piece of JSON, and this piece of JSON contains, you know, username and password. Okay, so Dan and Dan 123. Okay, so I'm going to send this request, and apparently I can't get any response now because you're dealing with HTTPS. I also have to check Postman because Postman has this little setting here called SSL certificate verification, and I'll turn it off because I'm using a SSL certificate. And also, let's try this again. Still 404 not found. Okay, maybe this request should be something like this: HTTPS. Sorry, HTTPS. No, HTTPS localhost 8443 dash login. Okay, so maybe by writing the full request, then this should be okay. Okay, so my application is started. Thinking, okay, so this is login. Like I told you, perils of live demoing. HTTPS localhost 8443. So apparently I cannot get this request to go to the server. HTTPS. Oh, obviously another typo in here. Okay, so now I'm hitting this endpoint. Okay, so sorry about this. I mean, a couple of typos, but right now we fixed it. So you actually need to call HTTPS localhost, the port, and dash login. You perform a post request, and in the body you put in username and password. Okay, so right now we entered this method. Okay, and basically we are trying to extract the credentials from the request. Okay, so we grabbed the credentials, which is just, you know, a login view model class. So right now the credentials, you have Dan and Dan 123. These are the things that, you know, we've sent in our request. And now we are going to build this authentication token. We are going to grab it. So we're going to grab this authentication token, and if everything goes according to plan, we should hit this successful authentication method. Okay. Okay, so we've hit this successful authentication method, and now what we're trying to do is we're trying to you know, get the user principal and actually create the JWT token. Okay, so we have the user principal, and if you go here we can see this instance of the user. So it's Dan, this is his password, he has the user role, no permissions, and he's active. Okay, so we went to the database, we extracted the user, authentication was performed against our provider, and now we can begin and create our token right here. Okay, so we are creating the JWT token, and now we're adding it to the response header, and we are finishing off the request. And now if you go into Postman, we received a 200 OK response, and here in the response header we have our authorization token, our authorization header, and now we have this token, which right now I see that it's not spelled correctly, so it's bearer and we have no white space. Okay, so this needs to be fixed, but either way we have this token right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and fix this because it's definitely not, it's not okay. So we have the token prefix, and now we have a little space, and the token prefix should be bearer. Okay, so now that we've managed to fix this, we know that authentication is working. Let's fire up the application again and see if the token we receive now is in the correct format. Okay, so I'll issue this request again. I'll hit this breakpoint. Okay, I don't want to hit these breakpoints over and over again because, you know, the application worked, and now we have bearer and we have the token, so everything is just awesome. Okay, so now that we have successfully logged in, I also want to make another request, you know, to API public, let's say admin users all. Okay, so I want to make this request an HTTP request, and now in here in the authorization I'm using a bearer token. Okay, and we have to enter the token. Okay, so the token, basically we need to copy this thing from here and we need to put it over here. Now we don't write bearer anymore because I have selected the bearer token type here, so it will automatically append bearer in this request. Okay, so let's try to execute this request and see what happens. Okay, also I'm going to add a couple of breakpoints in our JWT authorization header because I want to make sure that I'm hitting the doFilterInternal method. Okay, so we have the token, we pass in the token to this request, and voila, we are in the authorization token. We are reading the header. Okay, so the header is, you know, we have here bearer space and then the token that we've just sent. This is going to pass, and now we're trying to obtain the authentication object. So we're trying to read the username from the token, grab the user details, add the authorities, and then put them in, put the request in the pipeline. Okay, so we are going to step into this method and see that it behaves correctly. So we have the token now, and now we are decoding the token using the algorithm and our secret, and we are trying to, you know, grab the subject. Okay, okay, we have a lot of things in here. I'm just gonna hit next. I'm not really interested in decoding that token unless we have, okay, but we have a couple of errors apparently. So token signature resulted invalid when verified using the algorithm. Okay, let's just see that we use the same algorithm. So HMAC 502, and here we used, yes, and we used the secret, which is pretty cool. And now in the authorization filter, okay, we replaced the token prefix and we're trying to grab the subject, but we did not reach this because obviously this method did not work. Token signature resulted invalid, and we get that error because obviously there is a change between the token that we receive and the token that gets decoded, and the problem lies when we actually replace the token prefix from the token. So we receive bearer space token, and now in this part of the code you just need to pass in the token. Okay, so we make this replace, but we are left with this white space over here, and that's what's causing this algorithm to fail. Okay, So a better way of doing this is maybe we can make the token prefix bearer space, and we can get rid of this piece of code, and now everything should work as expected. So I'll fire up the application again, and now we should not see any mismatch between the the token that we get and the token that is verified here. So these are the kinds of errors that you can expect when you are working with JWT tokens and filtering, but at least if you hit them, you'll know a couple of paths to solve them faster. Okay, so I'll take this bearer token, I'm gonna copy it, I'm going to put it in this request over here, and I'm going to send my request. And now, okay, I've gotten rid of the white space, and hopefully my token is going to get verified now, and we actually grab the subject, which is Dan. That's our subject. Okay, now we grab the user from our repository by name, so we have our user right here. Okay, we create the user principal, and now we create an internal Spring Security username password authentication token, and we allow authentication to take its place. Now obviously what we get as a response is not found, because Dan doesn't have privileges to actually view that particular endpoint. Now if you remember from our security configuration class, this public admin section is only viewable by someone who has the role admin. Okay, and then definitely does not have that permission. Only the administrator has that permission. Also, I've noticed that I mistyped something here, so it's just users. I'm going to send this request again, and we get a forbidden response, and that's because Dan is not an administrator. Dan is not allowed to view users. Everything Dan can do is submit a request to API public -test, which is available for every authenticated user. Okay, so he gets a response here, but when we try, for example, to go to management-reports, for example, or admin-user, we get this forbidden message. Okay, so the validation and authorization are working, and those rules are taken into consideration. And to be able to access that, I'm going to request another token, but this time I'm going to be the admin user, so admin123. I'm going to request a new token. I'm going to copy the token for each subsequent request. I'm going to replace it here, and now I'm trying to make a request to API management reports, and because to admin users, because that's where I have roles, and I'm sending this, and now I'm getting the users because I am allowed to get the users. Okay, let's try to do management-reports, hit send, and again I'm forbidden because I'm not a manager. So this authentication works for these various roles, and that's the flow that you'll have in a normal token-based authentication app. So you issue the first request, you grab the token, and then on each request that you make, doesn't matter the request, you have to put the value of the token in the authorization header. And until that token expires, you are going to be authenticated and authorized in that application. Once it expires, you need to generate a new token, and restart this whole process over and over again. Cool. So our JWT authentication works, and that concludes the JWT security section of this Spring Security course. Now I know it's been a little bit difficult with some bugs, and fixes along the way, but like I said, we have this feature enabled, and because we're at the end of this video, you should be pretty confident in implementing such a solution in your own application. Now, the last thing that I want to mention is that we've barely scratched the surface of JWT authentication. So JWT is really complex, and if you're going to use it in a production like environment, then I suggest that you dig in and see all the options that are available for you. Before we close, I would like to remind you to subscribe to this channel and stay tuned for more software development tutorials that will sharpen your programming skills. Just go to the Romanian Coder YouTube page and click on the subscribe button. Also, if you found this video useful, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. If you have any comments, thoughts or ideas for new courses, just put them in the comment section at the end of this video, because I would love to get feedback from you guys. You can also find me on Twitter at Romanian Coder, and you can also check out my blog www.romaniancoder.com. Until next time, have a great day and write amazing code. Goodbye.